Sergio Perez's season has been marked by a significant decline in performance, quite the opposite of his promising start. After securing 2 victories for Red Bull, sharing the spotlight with Max Verstappen in the first 4 races, there were high hopes for Perez to challenge for the championship. However, his form took a steep downturn, and he even began to struggle in qualifying, despite being in the fastest car on the grid. The expectation was that he would deliver better performances, considering he drives the fastest car and is part of the Constructor Champion team. As a result, there have been numerous calls for him to be replaced throughout this season. Amidst some of the fans demanding Sergio Perez's removal from the Red Bull team, Helmut Marko, a Red Bull advisor, also expressed his dissatisfaction and was involved in a regrettable incident when he made racist remarks towards Perez this season. On the other hand, Christian Horner, the Red Bull team principal, staunchly supported Perez during this challenging period. However, Perez had a particularly poor race at the Qatar Grand Prix, which raised some concerns. This poor performance has once again put Perez's future at Red Bull in doubt as he continues to struggle alongside Max Verstappen. Christian Horner mentioned that he had plans to have a discussion with Perez because the Mexican had an extremely disappointing race in Qatar and needs to find his form again. In Qatar, Perez faced several issues. He could only manage to qualify in the 13th position for the main race, and he crashed out of the sprint race. During the main race, he incurred 3 penalties for going off track, and his final position was 10th. Meanwhile, Max Verstappen dominated the race and secured his 14th win out of 17 races. Former Formula One driver Gerhard Berger recently suggested that changing teams might help Perez regain his form, and Helmut Marko shared a similar view, drawing parallels to the struggles of Pierre and Alex Albon in the past. Marko, speaking to an Austrian outlet, mentioned that he had a positive relationship with Perez. He also acknowledged the strong support provided by Max Verstappen, who expressed his opinions about the situation. Marko emphasized that he was the one who brought Perez into the team. However, Marko noted that Verstappen is currently facing a challenging situation, similar to what happened with Pierre in the past. He agreed with Gerhard Berger's suggestion that Perez might benefit from a change in team and environment. Marko concluded by mentioning that the next 2 races will provide more insights, but both Perez and the team recognize that he is going through a difficult period. Max Verstappen secured his 3rd consecutive driver's title after Sergio Perez crashed during the sprint race. In the Drivers' Championship, Perez is currently only 30 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton, after Perez earned just 1 point in Qatar, finishing 10th in the race. Originally, he was 9th, but a penalty pushed him down to 10th place. This was a missed opportunity for him as Hamilton encountered trouble early in the race after a collision with his teammate George Russell. Perez received penalties during the Qatar Grand Prix for repeatedly going beyond the track limits. He got a 5-second penalty after his 4th violation and another one during his pit stop for the 5th violation. Towards the end of the race, he again exceeded track limits, which added more time to his final race result. Despite Hamilton's retirement from the race, Perez couldn't capitalize on the situation to secure 2nd place in the Drivers' Championship. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner expressed disappointment with Perez's performance. He mentioned that it was a tough weekend with the previous day's incident and the race penalties. Horner believed that without these penalties, Perez could have scored many more points and improved his position in the championship standings. Nonetheless, Horner still hopes that Perez can find his earlier season form. Even he, who had been defending Perez throughout the season, has to acknowledge the difficulties in this situation. Chico has had a bit of a shocker of a race, Horner said. He's had a horrible weekend, the incident yesterday, and then unfortunately the 3 penalties that he got in the race. During the race, Perez had a tough time figuring out the track limits, especially because they were changed at the last minute due to issues with the curbs. While Perez has a contract until 2024, Red Bull isn't ruling out the possibility of changes in the future. According to Nico Rosberg, the 2016 world champion, Perez might have been replaced due to his current performance if there was a suitable replacement available right now. However, Rosberg thinks that the problem is that there may not be ready alternatives. He believes that putting someone like Liam Lawson or even Daniel Ricciardo in a Red Bull seat would come with significant risks. Red Bull's driver manager Helmut Marko is increasing the pressure on Perez by saying that the gap in his performance is currently too big and there's a risk of losing second place in the World Championship. As for Perez's contract until 2024, Marko stressed that it's now up to Perez to prove himself. He also mentioned that Red Bull has 3 promising drivers in AlphaTauri, namely Yuki Tsunoda, Liam Lawson and Daniel Ricciardo. The team will monitor the situation and hopes Perez can find his previous form. Horner remains hopeful that Perez will regain his confidence in the next 3 races, especially when he competes in his home race in Mexico City with the support of fans. Horner also suggests that Perez should simplify his approach and focus on the basics of racing. Sometimes taking a step back and refocusing can be helpful. The team is committed to supporting Perez in finding his form again, as he has shown his skills earlier in the season with second-place finishes in races like Monza. However, there are comments and reports suggesting that Perez might contemplate retiring, particularly at his home race in Mexico. While this may not seem likely, the team might be considering that option as well. Horner has been a strong supporter of Perez, but it seems that Perez's performance is on a downward trend and he may not be able to defend him for much longer. This might be the only solution to Red Bull's season-long Perez problem. Perez has consistently delivered disappointing performances in recent races, including Suzuka and Singapore. About 60% of his races this season have fallen short of expectations. It's increasingly unlikely that he will continue to drive for Red Bull in 2024. Things have taken a negative turn for Perez, and it appears that his time with Red Bull is coming to an end. His numerous mistakes this season can no longer be overlooked, and even being lapped by his teammate in a race is a significant setback. Given McLaren's performance and the potential resurgence of Mercedes next year, relying on just one driver may not be sufficient for Red Bull. It's quite likely that the decision about Perez's future with Red Bull has already been made. Unless he performs exceptionally well in the next 5 races, it's doubtful he'll be with the team next year. Red Bull might be supporting Perez right now because they really want to achieve a first and second place in the championship. However, if Perez's chances of finishing second become slim, he probably won't continue with the team. With only a few races left, he might stay in the car until the end of the season, but it's unclear if they'll keep him as a backup or simulator driver. Perez might not be a perfect fit for Red Bull's car and their direction this season. His struggle to adapt and the frequent penalties he's received for going off track are concerning. His racing style works best with a stable car, and the Red Bull RB19 might not suit his preferences. This situation is similar to what happened with Daniel Ricciardo in his last year at McLaren. Whilst it's unfortunate for Perez, it's a reality check for him and those who had high hopes for him at the beginning of the season, including his father and the Mexican media. Right now, there's no pressure on the teams or drivers' championship because they've already won. Perez's poor performance isn't causing Red Bull to lose races because Max Verstappen is consistently winning. Christian Horner's desire for Perez to improve might be coming from pressure from Helmut Marko or the Red Bull management. They may feel that Perez is not living up to the team's expectations. Horner and Marko are aware that winning the Constructors' Championship next year will be tough due to strong competition from McLaren and Mercedes. Both of these teams have drivers who consistently score points. If Perez doesn't improve significantly, there's a chance he might be replaced. Red Bull Racing is planning for the 2026 season and considering their strategy, as all teams do. They have limited resources for aerodynamics compared to other teams. Red Bull might be willing to take a calculated risk by putting Max Verstappen against any driver in direct competition. However, they also need a driver who performs well in qualifying and consistently gathers points. They need a professional driver, similar to how Sergio Perez performed in 2021, perhaps without the need for a flashy show. Whilst it's not a common practice in Formula One and may not seem very professional, some suggest that Red Bull should test their best young driver this season if they've already decided on Perez's future. The reason for this is that they might not have this opportunity again, and most experienced prospective drivers are already signed by other teams. It's ultimately up to time to reveal what will happen with Perez and Red Bull, but it's likely that Perez's time with Red Bull has come to an end. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments below.